Joining us now, the Speaker of the North Carolina House, Tim Moore, also, of course, represents Cleveland County. Mr. Speaker, it's been a wild couple of weeks. We obviously, I've written a lot disagreeing with the court's action on the districts, but one thing that I think people don't realize that this impacts a lot of real people. People wondering where they're going to run, or do they have to move, or what it's going to be like. So what has your phone been like over the last few weeks with people? You have 69 members of the North Carolina House Caucus, all probably calling up wanting to know what's going to happen to them. What's all that been like?
Well, I tell you, it's been really challenging. We have a number of members who unfortunately were double bunked because of declining populations in some of our rural areas. So
that means they had to be put into a district with another member.
That's right. And very unfortunate, some very good members. But fortunately, we only had a few of those. But really, there's been a lot of questions, a lot of frustration, particularly for those candidates who were filing to run for what were going to be some open seats that were out there and who now have found that they are in another district. We've had multiple examples of that around the state, which is very unfortunate. And I think that's part of the problem with what the court did. There was the initial lawsuit that was filed. There was the judgment that was given there about setting aside those maps. We disagree very strongly with what the Supreme Court did. But despite that, we went back, Dallas, and we completely followed what that court's order was in terms of all the various metrics in place and drew, as you know, for example, on Congress, we drew 6 Republican seats, 4 Democratic seats, and 4 truly competitive seats. I mean, it doesn't get any fairer than that. And their response is to come through with a group of, with these special masters and draw what are just patently unfair maps. That have now basically created a Democrat gerrymander of a 7-7 map. And of course, as you know, we have now appealed that to the United States Supreme Court.
Yeah, when John Locke Foundation researchers and Andy Jackson, who handles our elections, when we examined the congressional map, we were shocked to find out that here we have 14 districts, and 13 of them are rock solid for one side or the other. It is a Democrat gerrymander. What they basically did was they decided that the Democrats were going to have 6 seats, and they were going to get 6 seats, and then they worked backwards. And the fact is, the only way to get them 6 seats is to, in my opinion, engage in a blatant racial gerrymander. That the only way you can get away with it is the court did it instead of a legislature. But that's where we are. The congressional maps will just be here 1 year. What have the state house maps left for you as far as opportunities and challenges going into this election?
Well, we feel that under these state house maps, again, which are hyper competitive, there are so many districts that are extremely competitive that, for example, may have voted for President Trump, but also at the same time voted for Governor Cooper, or that have from year to year switched as to how they tend to vote. So that's what, and that's that. We don't like these maps because we frankly think the initial maps we drew were better. We're actually more fairly represented communities of interest, avoided unnecessary divisions of municipalities and counties, and really overall made more sense. But in order to try to work within this framework that the court has given, we went in and redrew these districts. And so, as you know, in ours for the state house, we actually were able to reach a compromise, and it passed by a 115-5 vote, which is huge.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I know that you are a UNC grad, and I'm a Wolfpacker, and I told some people
you're still a pretty good guy.
Yeah, I try. I told some people that I saw 2 things I never thought in my lifetime I would see in the same week. One, the Carolina women's basketball team beat Louisville, which helped NC State, so I was happy Carolina won a game, and then I saw a bipartisan redistricting package passed. 2 things I never thought I would see in my life. I mean, I'd say, Mr. Speaker, that it's really incredible with all the rancor we've had, to come to an agreement on redistricting in the House.
It was, and very proud of that. And frankly, I'm disappointed that we did not have that same vote for the map that we passed, because if those on the left
on the
congressional maps, right, and really even on the Senate map. I mean, we didn't get into the weeds on the Senate map because that's their map, but it looked like that was a pretty fair map as well. But what strikes me is frankly just hypocrisy. I don't know how else to say it. Is those on the left say they want competitive maps. You've heard it, right? what could be more competitive than having 4 of the most competitive seats in the country drawn in there? And then that was enough. They then had to go to court and leftist judges go in there and impose maps that are nothing more than a gerrymander.
Yeah,
right? We would never have passed that map. I can't believe that the court sanctioned such a map. It's absolutely outrageous.
Yeah, and then the News and Observer, when they blasted the remedial congressional maps you draw, they said, well, there's a difference between fair and competitive. Well, okay, well, that means you haven't gifted enough seats to the Democrats. Yeah, I mean, it cannot be that our North Carolina Constitution requires one side and the other side to divide the seats up before the election, and competitive elections not to be allowed. I mean, the structure of North Carolina's Constitution cannot mean that, and I don't think in the long run it can stand.
I agree with you completely. I mean, the notion that partisan politics is somehow present in our Constitution is laughable. Number one, from our original Constitution and even some of the other derivations thereafter, the different parties didn't even exist, frankly. But the notion of having partisanship in the Constitution, that's never been done before. And on top of that, Dallas, the United States Supreme Court has already held that that there is no partisan fairness measure, because you can play with the data however you want to. But what strikes me, just really what bothers me and why we're appealing to the U.S. Supreme Court is, one, it is the constitutional duty of the North Carolina legislature to draw these districts, not a court, not a governor, not anybody else. So you start with there. Second, we even tried to work with them, by coming back and drawing these maps along that same criteria that they had spelled out, and we did so, and then they just disregarded it with really no explanation.
That's right. I mean, and I've covered a lot of this. They kept moving the goalposts on you, and I think you're to be commended for trying to comply with the court's order. But I tell you, I became convinced that you still have 69 members in your caucus to answer to, that there was not a congressional map that you could have gotten through your people that the courts were going to accept. But we'll be revisiting this again next year. So what do you, now you've got to get your members focused on tidying up a few things in the legislature and on the campaign trail. What do you think your candidates are going to be talking about?
So first off, we're having an excellent year when it comes to candidate recruitment. We have candidates who are stepping forward, good, solid, strong candidates, running in districts that years ago we would have thought there was no chance to win. What we're seeing right now with how the generic Republican ballot is testing against the generic Democratic ballot is we're actually absolutely getting ready for a huge red tidal wave this year in North Carolina. And I feel very confident. I know we're going to maintain the majority. And even under these maps that have, that help Democrats in a lot of ways, I think we can get to a supermajority, both in the House and in the Senate. Just because I don't care what you do with districts. When you do as bad a job as Joe Biden is doing right now, when you do as bad a job as what folks are seeing the Democrats do, whether it's international policy, whether it's economic policy with record inflation. We stopped and got gas up the road earlier today. It was $3.69 a gallon. I mean, folks see that, and they realize that what's happening right now has got to change. And I don't see any way that we don't expand our numbers, because a lot of folks who voted for Joe Biden and Democrats in the past are having some pretty serious buyer's remorse right now.
What is the legislature? We are in an election year. The legislature's got to take care of some business. What does the rest of that look like for you going forward?
So we're going to continue to work on ensuring all we can do on election integrity. We think that is vitally important that we continue to deal with that. We're going to come back week after next to override Governor Cooper's veto of the mask legislation. You may know we passed overwhelmingly with veto-proof numbers legislation to get masks off of our children, to let parents decide, not politicians, whether a child should wear a mask in school. And despite some lip service from the governor, he actually vetoed the bill. So here's what's happened in Dallas. You've got school districts around the state in some common sense areas where the children aren't having to wear masks. But I think even today, kids in like Durham County, Orange County are still being required to wear masks. And it's not science at this point. If anything, it's political science. So we're going to fight to get that law put in place. We'll make sure that we continue to get the budget working through, that money is spent wisely, that we continue down the road of reducing regulations, cutting taxes, and getting government out of from interfering in our lives, and otherwise making sure this state continues to keep moving in the right direction.
Mr. Speaker, we have at this conference, I talked earlier to John Hardister, a great member from Guilford County, who is in one of the closest divided districts that you have. We also have Dennis Rydell here from Alamance County, who probably has the reddest, most Republican district in the state. How do you manage the diversity within your caucus so well?
So we have a great caucus from all ends of the state, from all backgrounds, rural, urban, moderate, conservative, you name it. And our caucus really works together to try to find solutions to common sense solutions to normal problems that North Carolinians deal with. And we have a great caucus of folks who work hard and who leave their families, leave their jobs, and for $13,000 a year come to Raleigh for what's supposed to be a part-time position. Bear in mind, we went into session back in January of last year. We're still in session.
That's right.
We should have been done in July, but with what we've dealt with these runaway courts, with a governor who's pushing a far left agenda with dealing with COVID and all that, we've had to be in session. Not because we want to be, but because we have to be. And we're going to keep working. But I'm very fortunate. We've got a great group, and I've got a lot of folks who've stepped forward who want to make a difference for their communities as well.
You're the longest serving House Speaker in North Carolina history now.
Well, I've tied the record of Liston Ramsey back in the 80s.
Okay. Will you break that beginning next year?
I do intend to serve a fifth term as Speaker. So we're going to go out there and work hard and make sure that we can maintain, but more importantly, expand our numbers. And if the members of my caucus want me to continue serving, I'd be honored to do so. And I tell you, we have a great caucus. The way I approach it, Dallas, is, and when I go somewhere to a member's district, I always introduce that representative as my boss, because I work for those members. I only serve as Speaker, because they've put me in there. And so my job is to make sure that they're able to vote their conscience, that they're able to fight for and protect for things for their districts, and then also push for good common sense conservative government.
Thank you very much, North Carolina House Speaker Tim Moore.
Great to be with you.